put first in the writing was because of its type of writing, right? Its genre. So it's collected in the books with all the other books of its similar style. But the book itself was written first, and the reason why it was written first is because if you read the book of Job and you think you've got God all figured out, you don't, right? And it's really interesting when you read that book, and I quoted from it today in the sermon. Job's trying to figure out why it is that his kids have died. He's lost all of his property. He's sitting in the middle of an ash heap with boils all over him. And all of his friends keep coming to him and saying, well, Job, you must have sinned, right? The only reason why bad things happen to good people is because we did something wrong. And Job's sitting here going, but I didn't sin. I didn't sin. I didn't sin. And so in the end, he's justified. His friends are kind of like said, you guys really, you're not all that smart. You haven't figured God out yet. We get to the end of the book, and Job didn't curse God, and God looks at Job and says, no, you're right, you didn't curse me, and he's going to return. He's going to restore everything that Job had. And that sounds terrible. You think to yourself, how in the world can you ever restore children, right? This is going to, how many of you understand what Old Testament children were? What were they? What's that? That's their retirement. That's correct. And it's very difficult for us to understand it that way. We're not on that side of the planet. We're not in that culture. But children were an inheritance, okay? I'm going to grow old. I don't have a 401k. We don't have Social Security. How in the world am I going to be taken care of, right? So the more children you had, the greater your reward in your old age to be taken care of. So when God says, or when the book of Job says that God restored all of his children, it's not like he said, well, these replace the ones that died off, and your heart's all better. That's not what it's saying at all. It's saying, Job, I understand you need to be taken care of, and I'm returning all that to you, okay? But the idea with that book is that we have to start out before we ever get to creation to understand that life is not going to be easy. Life's going to be difficult, and sometimes things aren't going to make sense, okay? So then now we'll talk about Job later, but we go from Genesis to Exodus, and somebody who was here last week, tell me what Genesis is all about. Okay, the birth, that's correct, the seed, and the idea that God started out by saying, I am going to deliver a child, right? And that starts in the garden. That starts with Adam and Eve sinning and finding out that, they didn't do it right. And God comes to them and says, well, Adam, you're going to have to work the ground by the sweat of your brow. Eve, I'm going to increase labor or pain during child delivery. But know that there's this seed that's going to come from Eve. So we are tracking a child from the very beginning. So conception has taken place in Genesis. Now think about the gestation period has come its full term. What's that baby do? It exits the mother's body. Just like the seed has been given in Genesis, and now we're going to have an Exodus out of a 400-year period of gestation. You think 9 months is long. This was long, right? This baby grew to about 6 million people. Okay? Now we're going to have real hard time because God has promised a single seed to come from Eve's line. And quickly we move to the book of Exodus and find out that we have 6 million people to filter through to find that one seed. Well, here's the wonderful thing. Prior to our departure, Abraham has Isaac. Isaac has Jacob and Esau. Jacob becomes Israel. He has how many children? 12 children become the tribes of Israel, right? out of those 12, we are told which tribe the seed will come from. Which tribe? Judah, tribe of Judah. So now we know, all right? We've got, but we have the 12 boys. We don't have them separated yet into tribes. Okay, that's going to happen at the promised land. That's going to happen when God says, okay, out of you 12, right? We know the names. We just don't have them in their tribal positions. So we know that Judah, one of the boys, that's his actual name, is the line through which Jesus Christ is going to come. Now, I can't obviously describe to you what labor is like. Only from an outside perspective can I do that. But I do know it's painful. And I do know that things don't always go as planned. And when you start studying the book of Exodus, you've left from the seed. I'm just going to flip through it, all right? And if you have questions, you can stop and ask me. And if I don't know, I'll tell you. Moses is born during this time. The whole theme of this book is redemption. That God is redeeming for himself a people that are his own. That idea of redemption goes all the way through Scripture, okay, from beginning to end. The very fact that you're sitting in here today or being a part of a church, following who Christ is, means that you are a part of his redeeming plan. So God wants to pull out and redeem or save or keep for himself a people that are his own. And so he puts them into tell me where they're at. It starts with an E. Egypt. Why do you look at me like I'm going to pick on you or something? Because, I'm going to. Okay. All right. So they're in Egypt. All of the children have been born. All of their descendants are there. They grow immensely in population. Moses is born. Moses is going to be the deliverer. That's the whole theme of the book. I'm going to take Moses, and from Moses, here's this midwife. I'm going to deliver my child. Now you have to see the plagues that come. Okay? I remember when our first child was born, and Kim says to me, and we're just sitting around, at home, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Man, my back isn't feeling very well. I still didn't know what was going on. Okay. Next thing I know, that's my first contraction. Well, we better get to, I probably wasn't the panicky husband that you see on TV. I was more like we better get in the car, I suppose. I still don't know what I'm doing when it comes to that. Get her to the hospital. Everybody here knows the contractions come closer and closer. It gets more and more painful. That is exactly, now, you have the first issue, your back pain occurs, right? Here's the first one. It is actually, and I don't understand why they did this way, but the first one is, give me the first contraction, first plague. Because the magicians could actually repeat it. Water to blood. Yep, exactly. So, Moses comes over, takes his staff, touches the Nile, the water turns to blood. Everything in the water dies off. Now this is the beginning, and I gotta turn there because God promises deliverance. Okay, Moses before Pharaoh. The first plague, water turns to blood. And what do you think happens with all the fish in the Nile when the water turns to blood? They die. What would you do if you're a frog in the water? Get out. What's the next plague? Frogs, right? This isn't like we sit here and say, well, God just plagued them with blood for where the water was and then decides that he really would like to contaminate them with frogs. This is a continuous, ongoing first contraction, second contraction, and it intensifies as it goes, right? So the water turns to blood. After that, all of the frogs jump out, go up into everything. Okay, this is really cool. So the frogs come out. Now, what did you say happens probably with the fish in the water? They die. What happens when they die? They float to the surface. They rot. They go to the ground. They start rotting. Now, this is all while we've gone from water to blood. Now we have the frogs, and the frogs are because they're vacating the water, right? They're getting out of there. All the while that all these animals, all these dead fish are floating and rotting. What's next? Gnats and flies. Because we have to have a period of time where all these rotting, decomposing fish corpses get infested with all of these larvae, and all of this starts coming out, right? So now we have an intensifier, right? We have water to blood, we have frogs, we have gnats and flies. Oh, yeah, all right. So we have gnats and flies, and those little pesky things, they bite. Right? The water of the Nile, it's turned to blood. What can't you do now? Can't drink. What needs water to survive? Everything, but livestock specifically. Now the livestock are going to die off. Okay? This is, it's a perfect picture, and we can go through all the plagues if you want to. We don't need to. But it is a perfect picture of a woman in pain, a figurative picture, of a woman getting closer and closer to the delivery of her child. And then the nation of Israel, and I'm skipping some of the plagues because we can't stay on these things too long. I have 15 more minutes to finish this whole book, right? So, we have all these intensifying moments where this child is going to be delivered, and finally the nation of Israel is set free, and Pharaoh says, go, do what you want. They leave, and the picture is, not only do we have a picture of blood and water from the beginning, now they're going to have to cross through the Red Sea, which is a picture of, again, water. If you ever watched a baby born, you know that there's blood and water that's involved in this. And so the child is born, and out of this is the nation of Israel. Now, get this, okay? Please understand that it's not now that God says, here are the tribes of Israel. The tribes of Israel are all born in Jacob's boys, all 12 of them. Joseph included, even though Joseph lived in Egypt for a long time as second in charge, but Judah is the main son that we're going to follow at this point. We want to know his lineage, because out of Judah is the one that's going to come the Messiah. And we're staying here we're staying on the theme of redemption. How long were they in Egypt? Does anybody know? 400 years. The book covers from Egypt, or from the Exodus to Mount Sinai, it's going to cover about 80 years of time. Okay, so we get them delivered. Now, we'll get to Leviticus being more so this next week, but we get to Mount Sinai. They leave Exodus, everybody's marching, 6 million Jews or so. They get there. What's God going to give Moses right away on Mount Sinai? 10 Commandments. Why do we need 10 Commandments right away? This baby was just born, for crying out loud. Okay, we need something to live by. Exactly. This is how you're supposed to behave as a child of God. This is what it looks like. And Moses is coming down off Mount Sinai, right? And God has written these things out in tablets of stone for him, and he's carrying them. And it's not Monty Python's, 15, I have 15, and he drops one, 10 commandments, right? It's not like that, all right, okay? But it is, Moses in his anger breaks the tablets. Right? Why does he break the tablets? What's he seeing? Golden calf, right? Now look, guys, we get to this and we think to ourselves, we just got done seeing all of these plagues take place, all of these great things that God did, all of the, this is really cool, watch, I don't know if it's the History Channel or the Discovery Channel, but at the Red Sea, they think they have found where Moses crossed, because there are thousands of chariots that are buried at the crossing, right? And that's what happened. Pharaoh brings all his army in, and it covers him up. And the really interesting thing is obviously the chariots aren't chariots anymore. They're covered in a coral, right? But they're in perfect wheel form. And it is cool. So nobody has said for certain that's it, because we don't know, but what would there be thousands of chariots buried in this single aisle underneath the Red Sea for? I have to think where I'm at. So we get the 10 Commandments. Moses comes down. Does anybody here, do you ever go, why did they build the calves? Doesn't make sense. They just saw all these great signs of God, and now they're building calves, right? Have you ever been told by your parents not to do something, and then when they turn their back, you went ahead and did it anyway? Yeah, yes. The picture of Exodus is God redeeming us even though we're little turkeys. Right? Yes. So he gives Moses these 10 commandments to say, guys, listen, I just had a baby, and now that we're home, there are some new rules that we have to follow. Okay? And depending on how your life is, I know that when a child comes into your world, suddenly, at certain times of the day, it has to be more quiet than what it was before that baby was born, because now that baby's sleeping, right? And meal times are at more set times than before, right? And so God tells Moses, here's what it looks like, and he gives him 10 commandments, and those 10 commandments can be broken down to two things, two simple rules. What are they? Love God, love others. It is that simple. First 4 commandments deal with how I love God. The following 6, how do I love other people? Okay? And so now we have this family. And guys, this family worships God and God alone. And we love each other. But, Moses comes down off the mountain. He finds these people worshiping. And he said, well, look at this. we found this, all these articles of gold, and we threw them in the fire, and out of the fire came this golden calf. Yeah, so we have a problem with lying at that point too. All right. What's that? He was gone for a while. Not only do they think he was gone for a little while, even the Israelites go, well, you were up there, we didn't know what was going on. But not long enough. The problem is that Israel had been in Egypt for 400 years. That is long enough not only for you to have a new culture ingrained in you, but that is long enough for you to become a part of a tradition of culture, right? Where your father's father's father did this. So we're really, really hard on Israel sometimes when we say, those stupid people, they had the law. Well, yeah, we got the Holy Spirit. We got God dwelling in us They had God dwelling around them, and they still couldn't get it right. Well, we've got it actually better. And here's the issue. Here's the really interesting thing. You go, well, if God would just do this, right? Do you remember when Israel sets up its tents around God's camp? That it's set up a certain way, right? Actually looks like a cross. And the certain tribes are facing in order, north, south, east, and west, and they're all facing the middle where the tabernacle's at. And God's glory is in the tabernacle. It's called the Shekinah glory of God, okay? And they're all facing him. And they see it. It's a pillar of fire by day and a cloud by night. No, sorry. Pillar of fire by night, cloud by day, okay? Which gives us who God is. At nighttime, I'd like to give you a nightlight, right? I'll make you feel safe. I don't want you to be scared in the dark. And by day, I'm not going to let anybody see you. I will cover you up. Make sure you're taken care of. All right? That's the purpose of it. But you see this transitioning between day and night, and here's God's glory, right? You would think that those people would be so awe-inspired that they would follow God and love him. But there's this thing called the powerless presence of God in our lives, where have you ever seen something so majestic? Outside of my brother-in-law and sister-in-law's home, their kitchen window had the Grand Tetons out of it, and it was just it was gorgeous. What happens to that landscape after you've been there for a while? Yeah. Same thing with God in the lives of man. They see him, he's a pillar of fire by night and a cloud by day. Big deal. And now the family starts acting up. So now we have in Exodus 13 through 18, and 3 through 12, we have the deliverance of the nation. And then we move on through 13 through 18, and we have God giving them direction. Right? He's telling them this is where you need to go. He's taking them up to the promised land. They get to the promised land. Does anybody remember what happened when they got to the promised land? Now remember, this is really cool because this ties back into the seed. They get to the promised land, and not Jacob, but what do the people who go in and see inside of the promised land, they come back and they report and they say, oh my word, we're like what in their eyes? Grasshoppers in their eyes. Do you think that no, I'm not going to ask you that. That's literal, okay? That is literal. He is saying they went in, and we know that in New Testament era, the average height of a Jew was about 5'3". So I don't know in Old Testament era if that's true or not. I know that in the New Testament time of Jesus, we always see Jesus about our height, right? We're like, oh, he's 5'10" to 6'1", somewhere in there. No, he was about 5'3". Not a very tall guy at all. Especially if we go off the New Testament version of what they say about him. He was common, average, nothing about him stuck out, okay? So they walk into this place where God is going to deliver them from. He's redeeming them as his very own, and the people say, oh my goodness, we can't go in there, we can't take it over, we look like grasshoppers in their eyes. What happened in Genesis that would make that make sense? Yes. We have the Nephilim, who are fallen angels, looked and said at God's creation, and here's the thing to understand: all angels in the New Testament, are they masculine, feminine, or neuter? They're all masculine. They're all in masculine tense. And the New Testament tells us that in heaven, they're not given into marriage. Well, that's too bad. You create a whole group of masculine beings and tell them can't do anything. Then they look at God's creation and they see what? women. And they say, ooh, hubba hubba. And they come down to earth and they say, well, God said I'm not allowed to touch you, but I don't care. And they have children with those women. And those children are called Nephilim. They are beings that are not man, and they are not angels. And this is in Genesis. You can find this. I'm not making this up, right? This is not something that we find in a commentary somewhere. This is in the book of Genesis. And that's why the flood came. Because what did God promise Eve that would come from her? A seed. The only way for me to mess that seed up is to genetically modify it. So instead of man and woman getting together, fallen angels said, we'll take them for ourselves. We'll mess this whole system up. When we get to Exodus, these guys walk in. Now here, and this is the other thing I got to tell you. Angels had, I don't know how this works. Don't ask me to tell you this. I don't know. Angels had angelic DNA. So the men born from them, this is where we get a lot of mythology. Okay? You might think I'm crazy, but I really believe Hercules lived. I really believe Zeus lived. These guys were born, they were called, the Bible calls them heroes of old, men of renown. Spider-Man. Do you know, okay, I like Marvel movies, right, everything, but when you follow those out, do you know who all those people are? They're nothing more than the ancient gods reborn. Diana is Aphrodite. Okay? She's Greek. Diana's Roman. All they're doing is bringing the old gods back. I'm not saying that you shouldn't go to watch a Marvel movie. I love them for the pure entertainment. But you better understand what's going on there, because you get caught up in it. I just, don't like doing it. So, we get here, these guys walk in, and these guys, they have giants in the land. And they're saying, there is no way that we can go in and take these people out. Well, they started off, worship God alone. These guys get captivated and awed. Instead of the Shekinah glory that they're looking at around their tabernacle, they walk in and say, oh my word, look at the size of that dude. There's no way I'm ever going to bring him down. It's the story of David and Goliath. However, Goliath was considered small among the giants. Okay? Averaging between 9 and 10 feet tall. They sit, I'm thinking, that's small? So Jacob says, hey, we could do this. So they go in, right? They'll eventually slaughter all of them. They'll defeat them all. But here's the thing. We're not getting there today. Do they make it? Does this group make it into the promised land? They don't. So you have Genesis, which is the conception, the seed that's born. You have the Exodus, the book of Exodus, which is the baby delivered, the redemption of God. The baby's born, and now Satan really wants to come in and steal it and take it. And God says, nope, you can't have it. And the point of this is that God says, I'm with my child, right? That's why the Shekinah glory is with them. God's dwelling with them. He's not going to let anything happen to them. He brings a deliverer for them, which is Moses, who is an archetype of the person of Jesus Christ. They are not going to be allowed to enter into the promised land because they did not believe God. They let the things around them frighten them. which is pretty normal. The children are out. So let me just end with this. Right? 19 through 24, we have the moral code that comes to us. God gives us the 10 Commandments. And then in chapter 32, the end of the book, you get the building codes. You get all these. If you're an engineer or somebody a draftsman, you love the end of the book of Exodus because you have the building codes for the tabernacle and how it has to be built, because it is a earthly representation of the heavenly dwelling, and it has to be an exact representation. So God says this is how it needs to be built, right? We're home. Baby's born. We're delivered. We're redeemed. We come home. This is the new home. Build it exactly the way I say. Got to have nursery, got to have, that's not true for the tabernacle, but God's saying, I'm coming to live with you. I've had a child. The child's born. I'm coming home. That's what Genesis and Exodus are all about. Now, you're going to move from there, right? You're going to go to Leviticus. Leviticus is nothing but what? More rules. Why more rules? I mean, if you read Leviticus between now and next week. If you can't sleep, read Leviticus between now and next week. It will solve your insomnia problem. All right? But it's more rules because we couldn't get it right, even with the simple 2 rules. So God's going to say, okay, guys, here's the holiness code, is what he gives us. You really want to know what it looks like to be, and you get a whole bunch of laws, right? And one of these laws, can I pick on some of you? Love your neighbor as yourself. I got to remember what chapter this is. Some of you will know this right off the bat. These statutes. I should know this because I violated this law. I think it's this chapter. There's lots of rules in here. I can't see it here. I'll just pick them out from this one, right? You should keep my statutes, not let your cattle breed with different kind. Anybody violate that law? You ever let your cattle breed with other cattle? Shouldn't do that. Don't sow your field with 2 kinds of seed. Nor shall you wear a garment of cloth made of 2 kinds of material. Anybody violate that law? Check right now. I bet you everyone in here is a lawbreaker. If a man lies sexually with a woman who is a slave assigned to another man and not yet ransomed or given her freedom, a distinction shall be made that they shall not be put to death because she was not free, but he shall bring his compensation to the Lord. All sorts of stuff. When you come into the land and plant any kind of tree or food, you shall regard its fruit as forbidden. 3 years shall be forbidden, and you must not eat of it. The 4th year, the fruit shall be holy, an offering to the Lord. In the 5th year, you may eat of the fruit. Do you know, and I'm still reading as quickly as I can to see, I can't see it here yet. I think it's in 19. Do you know that the Bible actually says that you're not supposed to be tattooed? You're not supposed to be tattooed. No, actually, the piercings are okay. That's where Israel got a lot of their gold for making the calves. How many of you know I've broken that law? Am I going to go to hell? Why not? Because there's a new covenant. But why wouldn't God want me tattooed? That's odd. Oh. Not people who died. It is, when you see Elijah on Mount Carmel, you're very close. Huh? Absolutely. Yes. it wasn't just a tattoo like what I have, where it's a, I have the return of Jesus on my back on the horse with the sword coming out of his mouth, right? We're not talking that type of tattoo. This was where Elijah's on Mount Carmel, and all the prophets of Baal are cutting themselves. They mark themselves, right, with a scar, because they believe the more they let out of blood, the more their gods will answer them. The law was saying, don't look for answers from me by cutting yourself. Okay? That's what the concept of the law is about. If I let out enough, Jesus paid the price through his own blood. We don't need to worry about it. Okay? That's what Leviticus will get into next week. It's really very interesting. We get more and more laws. Why can't we wear one garment with multiple threads on it? It's because it's called sympathetic magic. It was a way to find an answer to prayer. And God said, you serve me, you love me, you look to me for answers, not somewhere else. These laws make sense, especially in their time. And so teachers are looking at me with daggers. You are free.